Start with a dramatic, slightly suspenseful tone, then transition into a more conversational, reflective style. My entire life, I was invisible, a ghost in my own home, constantly overshadowed by my golden sister. But on my wedding day, the one day that was supposed to be solely mine, she tried to steal the spotlight, and that's when I unleashed a revenge, so spectacularly sweet, it tasted like pure, unadulterated justice. Growing up, the favoritism wasn't subtle, it was a cruel, daily reality. If my sister accused me of something, even a blatant lie, my parents would believe her instantly and punish me severely. But if I had undeniable proof against her, she'd get a slap on the wrist, and somehow, I'd still end up being scolded. My birthday cake, my special day, was always her favorite flavor, and my parents would pretend they had no idea I hated it. They bought her more, took us where she wanted, even when the outing was supposedly for me. She grew up utterly spoiled, treating me like her personal punching bag. At first, it was mostly just neglect and occasional jabs, but things spiraled when we hit our teens. My sister somehow lost all her friends, and her behavior deteriorated into something truly venomous. I don't know if they moved away, or if she was just too mean to keep them. We were never close enough for me to ask. All I knew was that while my parents boasted endlessly about her achievements, they conveniently ignored her issues. Meanwhile, my flaws were constant fodder for their teasing. Always highlighted, always on display. I only knew about her friend situation because we went to the same school, and I simply noticed she was always alone. The irony? I was actually fairly popular. And my sister, noticing the stark contrast, suddenly shifted from an occasional tormentor to someone obsessed with tearing me down. She started accusing me and my friends of increasingly ridiculous things. My parents, naturally, sided with her, making excuses like, "They're not good people according to your sister," or, "Why are you trying to leave us? Why can't you be like your sister and enjoy family time?" I was spiraling into complete isolation, trapped in their suffocating, toxic bubble. What saved me, truly, was my extended family. Most of them lived in our hometown, and despite some age differences, I actually got along well with my cousins. During one family gathering, they invited me to do something. I honestly don't even remember what, and I just sadly blurted out that I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. When they asked why, my innocent, unfiltered kid self just said, "Because I'm not allowed to have friends since my sister doesn't have any." That little truth bomb made its way back to the adults, who I later found out absolutely tore my parents apart. Oh, I got scolded for lying and was grounded for a month, but it was worth it. After that, they actually gave me a tiny bit of leeway, a sliver of freedom. The humiliation, I guess, was too much for my sister. She demanded to switch schools, and my parents, as always, immediately obliged, despite the extra cost and distance. She did manage to make friends at the new school, but the damage was done. Having tasted the power of messing with me, and still furious that I'd exposed her social standing to the family, she never went back to ignoring me. My life remained difficult. Her friends would come over and bully me, which my parents dismissed as light teasing. I never invited my own friends over because my parents were awful hosts, or my sister would accuse them of stealing, and my parents would, of course, believe her. Luckily, my bond with my cousins grew stronger, as my parents never dared treat them that way. Then, I got my first boyfriend. I really didn't want to bring him home, knowing what would happen, but my parents insisted. At one point, we got separated, and he came running to find me, absolutely fuming. He told me my sister had cornered him, came onto him in skimpy clothing, batting her eyelashes, and proceeded to trash me while praising herself. He was so utterly disgusted he ran off to find me. Of course, my sister spun a completely different story to my parents. My boyfriend had tried to flirt with her, but she, being the angel she was, naturally refused. Guess who they believed? Now, my boyfriend wasn't perfect, but I believed him immediately. And here's why, in a rather mean way, I was a resentful, moody teen, suffering from years of unfair treatment, and I hated my sister as much as she hated me. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's talk about looks. My parents were overweight and showed love through food. More treats, more meals. My sister was also overweight. I, on the other hand, was always quite skinny, probably because my punishments often involved no treats or snacks. Weight isn't what truly matters, personality is, but even then, my sister was rude, spoiled, and completely clueless about how to actually earn anything. Her flirting attempts were genuinely bad because she'd never learned to work for what she wanted. Add to that the fact that she didn't exactly look like a sexy model, and even my self-conscious teenage self didn't believe my boyfriend would ever try to cheat on me with her. Dating such a horrible boy, I tried to keep it going in secret, but it was impossible, and the relationship eventually fizzled out. I found another boyfriend, but guess what? My sister accused him of flirting with her when he rejected her advances. And again, my parents believed her. I tried to point out the pattern, how this had happened again, but they just decided I was incapable of making good choices and kept picking bad boyfriends. That Romeo and Juliet drama was too much for the relationship to handle, and it ended too. I eventually got a reputation in high school for being fine with making out, but refusing actual relationships, mostly because I knew what would happen. Thankfully, that never got back to my sister or my parents. By the way, if you're still with me in this wild ride of a story, please hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss the truly unbelievable tales coming your way. My sister, on the other hand, did bring one boyfriend home during all this. He was paraded around with immense pride, and my parents spent every waking moment telling me how wonderful he was and why I couldn't be like my sister and find someone like that. Until, of course, he stopped showing up. Then he was suddenly a conniving bastard who had tricked my sister. Oh well, and the unequal treatment continued. She had more spending money, much better curfews, free to go anywhere, anytime. I, meanwhile, was still under strict lock and key. If I pointed it out, my parents would say, it's because she's older. But when I reached that age, I still didn't have her freedoms. And when I brought that up, they flat out denied they'd ever said it, or claimed it was because I couldn't be trusted, conveniently using my sister's past accusations against my boyfriends and friends as proof of my bad judgment. Time went by, and it was my sister's graduation. She was accepted into a college, not a particularly well-regarded one, and with no scholarship. Again, because only her achievements were ever spoken of, I don't know which colleges she actually tried for, so I can't say how badly she was rejected. I do know her grades were bad, because even AB was cause for celebration. I, usually getting good grades, received no such fanfare. What's there to celebrate? They'd say. You always get those. My parents, naturally, made a huge fuss over her college acceptance, promising to pay for everything. I was just relieved she'd be going away. Not that it made my life any easier. She came home every other weekend, and somehow, things would go missing from my room, or she'd find some other way to make my life miserable. My curfews remained impossibly strict. Eventually, my mom came to talk to me about my own impending graduation. I'm only a year younger than my sister. She told me that since they were paying for my sister's college, they had no money for mine. It would be better for me to start working immediately after graduation and wait until my sister finished university to see if they could afford something for me. Oh, and if I decided to stay home, I'd have to pay for all my own stuff, part of the bills and rent. I pointed out I could get student loans. Mom, with a straight face, said, yes, except no. Because we're so caring towards you, and you have such bad judgment, we will decide if a college is worth you getting into debt or not. I'm still not sure how they thought they'd stop me from getting loans, but I didn't ask. Scholarships weren't even mentioned. They hadn't bothered to know my grades in years and never truly believed in my capabilities anyway. I didn't bat an eyelid. I just said, okay. My mom clearly didn't expect that. She kept crying, maybe hoping I'd throw a tantrum, so they'd have an excuse to never pay for my college. But I just said nothing, except that I understood their position, thanked them for caring, and that was that. My dad later tried the same, but I refused to give him any emotional reaction either. You see, after a whole lifetime of their terrible parenting, I never had any expectations towards my education. I knew they would find an excuse not to pay for mine, and make my life miserable. I never believed they would eventually pay, if I worked and waited for my sister to graduate. I had been preparing for college for a long, long time. I could barely go out, my friendships were slim, so I had a lot of time to study. And study I did, because I saw college as my only chance to be truly free. Well, the time came. I worked my ass off and got a full scholarship. Not to an Ivy League, or for law or medical school, but it was a good enough course in a decent college, completely paid for. Knowing my sister would absolutely hate it, and try to stop me via my parents, I put my achievement on social media at the exact same time I told them, even forcing myself to thank them in the post. Now, they couldn't forbid me from going, as they'd have to explain to the whole family why. Initially, they were even a little proud and boasted about it. And then, I guess my sister got to them. They changed gears, even asking if I was sure I wanted to go. They let slip that my sister wasn't doing well in college, and since she was smarter and had better judgment than me, I'd suffer even worse. I obviously stuck to my guns. They weren't happy, but couldn't do anything. College was my savior. I finally started being happy. I still contacted my parents and visited on holidays, but since they refused to pay for anything, I could legitimately excuse not going a lot due to money. During this time, I avoided introducing any men to them. My sister, by the way, stopped going to college. I know she didn't graduate because, again, they'd have made a fanfare about it. She moved back home, paying no bills or rent. But it's different, my parents said, and started working at the same company as my mom, thanks to my mom pulling strings. This was all presented to me as a point of pride. Almost there, I promise. I met my husband around this time. You know those people who say, if I were in that situation, I'd have done something. My husband is the type who actually does. I'm the type who's meek, a doormat in any situation, and then can't sleep at night wishing I had done something, had thought of something witty to say. I'm the person who can't help but cry when I'm angry. My husband, he claps back immediately. He loves drama and loves to resolve it. He's the guy that if he doesn't immediately reply to a slight, you better start worrying because he won't forgive and forget. He's just plotting something worse for revenge. He's the one who wanted me to post here, and even wanted to post on a nuclear revenge board, but eventually decided what we did wasn't quite nuclear. People were baffled that I got together with him, but just because I was incapable of acting like him due to my upbringing didn't mean I didn't love it. I adore that my husband does what I can't, and he treats people well, as long as they do the same to him. When we discussed marriage, we decided we didn't care much for a huge ceremony due to our budget. We'd rather spend on a dream trip to Europe for our honeymoon. As for where to do it, since his family was spread out and mine was still mostly concentrated in my hometown, we decided to do it there. We weren't living too far off, so we could take long weekend trips to manage things. Plus we had some work flexibility to stay in my hometown for a bit if needed. We sent out the engagement announcement and the save the date for a few months later. At this point, my parents naturally demanded to meet my man. I wanted to grow a spine and refuse, but I was having a hard time. The distance had made me think, maybe my parents weren't so bad. Well, my husband looked like I had canceled Christmas when I told him. He simply said, "Fine, but I'll make sure they're never alone with you." See, he had been getting ready for this. He even bought a high-quality recorder he could hide in a pocket to record it all. He was stoked, thinking of all the ways he could refuse my sister's advances, insult her, and then spread the recording of her attempts to my family. So, off he went, alone and excited to meet them, and came back later, absolutely euphoric. Babe, you won't believe the awful things they wanted. Babe, we can screw them over so bad. There are so many possibilities. I was confused and wanted to hear the recording, but he smartly told me it was better to listen to him first, or else I'd misunderstand. Well, he went there, and instead of flirting, my parents and my sister sat him down. After some grumbling about them not being okay with him, my judgment, etc., they proclaimed they were willing to pay for my wedding, on one condition. My sister would walk down the aisle. My parents insisted that my sister would walk down the aisle at my wedding first, in a wedding dress. Their excuse: it wasn't okay for a younger sister to marry first, so it was only fair if my sister at least had the experience of it at my venue with pictures being taken in her dress, and she'd even have a cake later. This next part is from my husband's perspective, as he wrote it for me to include. Asterisk hey, vengeful husband here. Hell hath no fury like a pro-revenge, instant karma, nuclear revenge lurker when his beloved is scorned. That said, as much as my wife, she's my wife now. Paints me as this quick-witted dude. I admit my neurons all but short-circuited when those folks legit suggested that crap like some sort of great gift. Even Troy would rather take in the horse a second time, he thinks. Alas, after my brain rebooted, I did have a whole list of insults ready to spew out, but something in my soul whispered in my ear like the devil, "String these idiots along." So I said I needed to think, see how my wife, back then fiancé, would react, and then ran out of there before I could give away my nefarious plans. Back to me, the wife, asterisk. So, my husband sincerely recounted how my parents wanted even my wedding to be about my sister, with a wide grin on his face and the recording to prove it. I was utterly shocked. The distance had genuinely softened how badly they treated me, and I thought even they wouldn't go so far. Thankfully, my husband insisting on the angle of revenge helped me not fall into a bad headspace. We had an absolute blast thinking up ways to screw them over, from ridiculously outlandish to what we thought was feasible. We then called his much more level-headed brother, and when we decided on a plan, it involved having 2 venue addresses, giving them the wrong one, etc. Well, the level-headed brother scolded us for it. While he acknowledged he would never be able to convince us to avoid retaliation, he at least showed us that something like that would be hard to pull off. Some of our other ideas were also at risk of getting us sued, so we eventually settled for the most benign plan. Act like we agreed, but then hire security and don't let her in. Obviously, if that was all, it wouldn't be pro-revenge. The rest is mostly my husband's doing, but he wants me to do the honors, so here goes. Just important to mention, everything he did was previously discussed with me, and they were our mutual ideas. He went back to my parents, said he probed, and thought I wouldn't be down with it. However, he didn't see the issue, and not wanting the family to fall apart, would be down to help them do it. He pointed out that I don't like conflict, so if I was surprised with it, I might not throw a tantrum in front of all the people. On the other hand, marriage is a big thing, so who knew if I'd lash out? Thus, he suggested a compromise. They'd help pay for stuff. This way, I would feel even more pressure not to say anything, as not only would we be public with our families there, but I'd be grateful for the help they gave. He said my parents looked shocked, and my grown sister literally started skipping with joy like a child. So it was accepted. Importantly, my husband also claimed that due to some bad judgment in past boyfriends, these words were all my idea, and I'm so proud of using their words against them. I was distrustful and controlling, and liked to check his phone and stuff, to ensure he wasn't cheating on me. As such, it was imperative that nothing of this plan was ever put in writing. For any discussion pertaining to my sister walking down the aisle before me, he would go over to their house to talk. And so began the months of deception, where my parents and sister thought they were tricking me, while my husband and I were absolutely milking them. Rather than paying for the wedding, they became our unwitting financial backers for the most extravagant party of our lives. Of course, my parents wanted input in everything, including some things that meant a lot to me, like the songs and color palette. My husband would convince them to let it go to keep me in line. But since we never really cared for the ceremony to begin with, everything else was fair game, or so they thought. Here's what we did. We go to check the drink and menu options, and then accept the lowest or second lowest priced option. My husband would then secretly take my sister there to try it out and then sigh and say, "It's a pity we don't want to abuse my parents' goodwill, so we won't get the best options." Cue my sister demanding my parents pay for the absolute best. My parents would then tell me not to worry, and they'd pay for the most expensive option. The same was done with the photographer and flowers. My husband handed my sister a bouquet of the flowers we wanted, and then sadly expressed how I wanted some other tasteless flowers. Cue my parents telling me they wanted us to go with said flowers, and they'd pay for it. When it came to the wedding dress, we hit a minor snag. My parents wanted me to use a hideous dress. Okay, it wasn't outright hideous, but it wasn't my style and wouldn't look good on me. We had planned on saying yes, and then simply not using it, but my mom sent me a message about it, so there'd be proof. I said, okay. We had to go with me refusing to text and standing my ground. My husband went over there and said he'd see what he could do. My sister suggested ruining my desired dress, so I'd be forced to wear the other one. He pretended to agree. During all this time, they kept communications outside any text. We made sure that happened by having me reply to my sister when she tried messaging my husband. This solidified the controlling and neurotic claims my husband was making, so they believed it and never risked anything in writing. Some people might not like the thought of their partner going around and talking badly about them to family, but I'm such a doormat that the thought of being painted as this controlling and dangerous person is extremely funny to me, and I egged him on to do it. I guess I have a warped sense of humor. Oh, and my sister did try to flirt with him, but he acted conflicted to really sell that he was with them. My husband would pretend to tell them things without my knowledge, but he never told them we hired security. It was truly funny. My husband and I, who had sincerely considered a courthouse wedding to focus costs on our honeymoon, ended up having this extravagant, expensive wedding and barely spent a dime ourselves. We called it back pay for emotional damages from my parents. I think my husband, okay, he just confirmed I'm right, was enjoying the whole trick more than planning our wedding. I didn't think it was possible to witness a guy beaming at the thought of wasting his whole Saturday doing a car trip to discuss wedding details with his in-laws, but here we are. Had come up with was to wait until everyone was seated. Since the bride always comes out late, they'd have my sister arrive at that precise time to avoid me seeing her and trying to stop it, and she'd walk down the aisle. By the time I heard what happened, it would be too late to do anything. As for my dress, we saved some of the leftover fabric from my dress alterations. My husband took that to my parents' place, my sister still lives with them, and showed them as proof he'd ruined the dress. Then said he had to go back to me as I was raging, and he needed to calm me down. He told them he'd see them at the wedding. We made sure to keep our Real security hidden initially. As the guests and my parents arrived, they only saw a woman with a list of names to check. Only after my parents had settled in did we bring out the actual security, a guy who looked like a bodyguard. We instructed him not to let my sister in and promised a generous tip if he kept our instructions confidential. Soon, the moment arrived. My parents got a text that my sister was less than 5 minutes away, so my dad signaled for the ceremony to start. My bridesmaids had been prepped to follow his lead, so they did without checking with me. After they all took their places, my dad stood at the entrance waiting for me. During this, a friend, not in the wedding party, texted me to get ready to avoid suspicion if my husband or bridesmaids started texting. This friend, my husband's ally, was as eager to stir drama as he was and didn't mind not being a bridesmaid. As soon as my dad took his position, the bridal song began. The doors opened and I entered. My dad was utterly shocked to see me. He tried to look behind me, but couldn't see the venue entrance from where we were, so he had no idea what had happened to my sister. Then his phone rang. I saw the caller ID, and it was her. He left me with a mumbled, "Something came up." Gasps and confusion filled the room. The friend on the plan loudly asked, "What happened?" I lied and said tearfully, he told me it wasn't supposed to be me there. My husband and I had agreed that if my dad abandoned me, I should say that to make him look as bad as possible. The tears weren't just acting. I was genuinely hurt and trying not to cry. The friend then loudly asked, "What did he mean by it shouldn't be you?" so that everyone could hear and spread it. Then she said, "I will go and check," and ran off. We planned this so she could create chaos with the security and prevent my dad from returning to stop the ceremony. Eventually, my mom also left. At this point, my husband's dad quickly ran over and took my arm. He'd been forewarned he might need to. His desperate run to me made me smile. I walked down the aisle to whispers as people discussed what had happened. Some left to check as well. When I reached my husband, all was well. He comforted me, joking that my sad face was so real I deserved an Oscar, and reassured me he'd deal with my parents for what they did. We got married without any further issues. My parents didn't come back. I noticed a lot of people leaving and returning during the party, but no one dared tell me what was happening. Someone whispered in my husband's ear and he went out. He returned later with a thunderous expression, but whispered to me that he needed to go hide before he broke character and started smiling. It worked. Here's the summary from friends, family, the security guy, and my husband that I got afterwards. My sister arrived in a wedding dress. The security refused to let her in as we had agreed. He told her she must be at the wrong venue because there was already a bride. Yes, we tipped him very well as promised. My dad tried threatening him with the police, claiming he'd never heard of him, so he couldn't be working there. The security agreed to call the police since he was hired by us and was just doing his job. My dad realized it would be too late and tried to demand that he let my sister in. At this point, the friend came over, started shouting and insulting my sister, and asking what was going on, basically stalling. My mom soon arrived, followed by others. By then, the wedding plan was utterly ruined. All my parents could do now was damage control, as everyone who learned about it was horrified they'd try to pull it off. People started screaming and berating them. The three naturally said it wasn't a secret and blamed my husband. When he was called over, my husband put on his best confused look and denied everything. To quote him, "Gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss, LOL." He denied ever agreeing to such a ridiculous plan. When they insisted he had, he demanded proof, and of course, they couldn't provide any. All the text exchanges they could show were about normal wedding decisions. My sister was screaming, crying, and apparently sat on the floor, kicking her legs like a child. My dad looked like he wanted to hit my husband, but security and other people held him back. Naturally, they claimed they had no proof because my husband told them not to text. My husband laughed and said, "Wow, how convenient, huh?" Then he repeated, "Why would I ever agree to something so messed up?" He ripped into them about being terrible parents and said he wasn't going to let their stupid plans and lies ruin his wedding, then went back to me. No one believed them. The venue had cameras, but they wouldn't show me the recording as it was only for security purposes. However, some people filmed parts of it. Watching my parents and sister get torn apart by everyone who came out to see the drama was delightful. After years of being accused of things and not being believed, seeing them get a taste of their own medicine was one of the best wedding gifts. My mother was crying, my dad kept changing from purple to white, and my sister was still on the floor, crying and screaming. They kept insisting that my husband was in on it, but people kept asking why he would agree, why there was no proof, and why they wanted my sister to do this at my wedding. They had no good answers. Eventually, they were told to leave and had no choice but to do so. My dad apparently had to drag my sister up as she refused to leave the ground. Again, people said nothing to me all night. I guess they wanted to spare me, and maybe it's because I was the bride and not just a guest for once, but it did feel like everyone was making an extra effort to be nice, positive, and excited about everything. My husband says all the expensive food and drinks they were eating certainly helped, LOL. We had a blast. My husband kept up the forced angry face for only a short while before breaking out in smiles again. After that, we went to the hotel to catch some sleep before heading off on our honeymoon. Speaking of which, my parents did try to pay for our plane tickets, but we thought that was risky, as they could try to cancel them or something, so we refused. Since then, the three of them have tried to contact me. I've refused calls because my husband insisted on keeping a paper trail. A smart move, because my sister eventually messaged me. I won't repeat what she said, as it was very unhinged and didn't make much sense, but the important part was that she blamed me for her humiliation, called my husband a two-faced snake who fooled them for months. He wants to print and hang that on our wall, LOL, and hoped, but was also certain, that I'd get cheated on by him. She even suggested he was cheating on me with her. My husband took my phone, screenshotted the call logs, my sister's messages, and some messages from my parents demanding I pick up the phone, and send it all to our family group chat. He also sent screenshots of messages to him where they called him names and threatened him, but he kept up the "you're delusional, I never agreed to anything" shtick, and even threatened to sue them for defamation and harassment. He wrote a message in the group chat begging my family for help as I was now being harassed by them constantly. He pleaded with them to stop my parents and sister from ruining our honeymoon after they failed to ruin our wedding. He ended with a request that they not share our locations to prevent my parents from sending my sister over, and claiming he had somehow agreed to pretend to sleep with her in our honeymoon suite. LOL. My family assured him they'd handle it, and since then, we've had peace. My husband is a bit disappointed that my sister didn't disobey, so he could call her out again while tearing her a new one. We'll see if the peace lasts. All in all, while I would have preferred a normal, loving family at my wedding, at least for once in my life, they not only failed to ruin something meaningful to me, but I got back at them. Reflective tone. You might be wondering, why do they treat me like this? I've pondered this all my life, and still don't truly know. When I was young, I tried asking, but they denied any difference and scolded me for being spoiled, so I stopped trying. I've considered many possibilities. Based on my observations, I think it's this: I was unplanned. It took a while to have my sister, so she was not only wanted but also like a miracle child after so long. However, given our small age difference, I think they didn't expect to have another child so soon or easily, and didn't use adequate protection after my sister's birth. Maybe they didn't realize my mom was pregnant until it was too late, so they were saddled with an unplanned baby while still dealing with a newborn. They're not well off, so having the extra expense likely didn't help, and they resented me. But that's just my conjecture. Regardless, I've accepted that the reason won't truly matter. What they did to me was unwarranted, no matter what. And did they really think this would work? My husband and I have a theory that they never intended to do this at all. We think my sister threw a tantrum over me getting married first when she barely gets dates, and they made my husband that outlandish proposition. They didn't want to pay for my wedding and didn't think we'd accept, or that it would even look good for them to do it. By suggesting it and being refused, they could look like the good guys to my sister while having an excuse not to give me a dime. But then my husband accepted it, and they couldn't backtrack without risking my sister turning on them. So, while I may never have that idyllic, loving family moment I once dreamed of, I got something far more satisfying: justice. And a husband who isn't afraid to fight for me. Switch to a direct, engaging tone for CTA. After hearing all this, I'm genuinely curious. If you were in my shoes, would you have gone to such lengths for revenge? What do you think truly motivated my parents and my sister? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.